When Elias passed away, I told myself I'd stay only a few months, just enough to help Tanya find her way. She was dealing with the grief of losing twins, a husband with impossible hours. I had time, energy, and the instinct, so I moved in with them. That was 3 years ago. At first, it felt good to be useful. I woke up early, prepared school lunches, washed clothes without stopping. I took my pension and used it to cover the gaps their salaries couldn't fill: groceries, utilities, daycare deposits. I paid without complaint. That's what family does, I kept telling myself, but as the months went by, the thanks faded, the favors became obligations, and the space I occupied, both physically and emotionally, shrank. Tanya stopped asking if I would have dinner with them. The twins started calling Beatriz the other A, even though she lived on the other side of Puebla and barely showed up. She mentioned Elias every once in a while, but only received silence in return, as if he were an old telenovela no one watched anymore. Still, I stayed. I cooked, adjusted the thermostat they set at 20 for Christmas. I ignored the sideways glances when my mystery shows played loudly. I told myself I was lucky to be close to my grandchildren. That's how life goes when you're useful, even if not wanted. Then, last Tuesday, while folding the kids' socks, Tanya came into the laundry room with her phone as a shield. "Mom," she said without looking at me fully, "Nestor's parents are moving here." I blinked, holding a sock in my hand. "Are they coming for a visit?" "No, to live here forever. We need the space." I laughed, expecting a smile that never came. "You'll have to leave by the end of the month," she said. I burst out laughing, unable to stop. It sounded absurd, like a line from a cheap comedy, but her face didn't change, arms crossed. She was serious. I slowly placed the socks in the basket, as if the motion would delay reality. Then I walked past her. I swallowed the pain. In the hallway, I glanced at a family photo on the shelf. My frame, my copy, but I was no longer in it. The study door was open. Inside, boxes were stacked. The next morning, the change had already begun. Tanya knocked softly on my door, as if she were a guest passing through. She entered with a plastic smile and a marker in her hand. "Hey, do you mind starting to pack up non-essential things to make room for the in-laws? I think the study closet can hold some of your things for now." Non-essential, I looked at the room. Everything was mine: the quilt, the bookcase, even the lamp on the nightstand. But I nodded and said, "Of course." That afternoon, she peeked her head into the kitchen while I was preparing dinner. "One more thing, Beatriz is allergic to many smells. Strong aromas affect her sinuses. Could you tone down the chili and garlic for a while?" I stirred the pot slowly. "Of course." That night, I was carrying towels to the laundry when I overheard them talking in the living room. I stopped at the edge of the hallway, hidden behind the half-wall. "We'll put Beatriz in the master bedroom," Tanya said. "Diego can stay in the room downstairs." "And your mom?" asked Nestor. A pause. Then his dry, casual voice. "She can go wherever. Maybe the kids will sleep together and we'll turn her room into theirs." I didn't answer. I returned to my room, forgetting the towels. A knot formed in my soul, as if I had swallowed something sharp. In the following days, things changed. The coffee I liked was gone, replaced with more fruit and pre-made food. The thermostat was set to 19, and no one offered me a blanket. At dinner, the seats were rearranged. Beatriz's chair was already next to the kids, as if it was waiting for her. Mine was pushed under the table untouched. The kids stopped asking me for bedtime stories. Tanya said they were too old for that now. I started spending nights alone in my room, eating off a tray, watching old videos with the volume low. I made a habit of walking around the house at night, barefoot and silent. It was the only time I felt it was mine. I turned on the porch light, checked the locks, folded a loose blanket, small routines like muscle memory from a life I was still living, but no longer invited to. That's when I started taking inventory, not just of what was mine, but of what I was no longer allowed to use. Carmela stirred her tea slowly, frowning as she watched me from across the table. We saw each other every first Thursday at Café La Rosa, but this time was different. She hadn't said much since I arrived. "They're not pushing you out," she said finally, putting down her spoon. "They've erased you." I let out a soft laugh, more air than sound. I know, I said. But hearing it out loud makes it feel different. Back home, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. I didn't do this often. I've never measured love in pesos, but Carmela's words stuck to me like vapor. I checked the statements month by month: grocery purchases, automatic service payments, direct checks to Tanya for extras. I made a spreadsheet. By the end, the total came to about 500,000 pesos. I leaned back in the chair, the number pounding in my head. 500,000. From a fixed income, quiet pesos that kept their home afloat without recognition or gratitude. I opened a drawer and took out an old folder. Inside were the papers I had gathered years ago when I thought about buying a condo in Angelopolis after Elias' death. I had a down payment of 150,000 pesos ready. I was days away from signing when Tanya called, crying. The cost of daycare for the twins had doubled. Nestor was out of work. I transferred the down payment the next day. She cried on the phone, promising to return it. That was almost 3 years ago. I closed the folder and held it in my lap, the edges softened from use. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. But something in me had changed. It was no longer about space, no longer about Beatrice's allergies, the empty rooms, or the menus. It was about being useful until I wasn't anymore. Needed until I became inconvenient. I placed the folder on the countertop and stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled a pen from the drawer and wrote on a sticky note. Look for the papers, put it in writing, record everything. The note stayed there, either as a warning or a promise. I waited until the kids were outside with their bikes. Tanya was in the kitchen, stirring a bland store-bought pot of something. I stood beyond the counter, my hands crossed, as if I needed an appointment. Where do you expect me to go? I asked. She didn't look up. I don't know. You're smart. You'll figure it out. I blinked, letting the silence settle between us. Nestor's parents need stability now, she added, as if that made it any less cruel. They're old enough. Beatrice is pre-diabetic and Diego has back problems. They need care. I almost laughed. As if I hadn't been the one waking up early to shovel snow, taking the kids to the doctor, cooking from scratch, as if I hadn't been the one keeping this house when they could barely do anything. You've had your time here, she said, turning away at last. It's time. It's time. As if I had been on an extended vacation for which I should be grateful, as if I hadn't given my life to fit into theirs. I nodded slowly, understanding. I walked into the living room without saying more, and there it was. The family photo that had been on the mantle from the summer we went to the Aljajuca Lagoon, with Elias' arm around my shoulder and the kids sticky from popsicles, was gone. In its place, a framed photo of Nestor as a child with a boy I didn't recognize. The frame was new, with a shiny golden border, prominent. I stared at it longer than I wanted to. When I turned, Tanya had already gone upstairs. That night, while the house buzzed with talks about arrival dates and hypoallergenic pillowcases, I took my tea to the garage and sat on the cold step next to the dryer. I took out the notebook I had been carrying since Elias died and wrote 2 lines. This is no longer my home, but it's not yours yet. I closed the notebook and tucked it in my sweater. Then I opened the cabinet above the washer and began making a mental list. I started with the washer and dryer. I bought them when the old set broke in the middle of flu season. Tanya was desperate. Nestor was away on a trip. I went to the appliance store the next morning and paid in full. The receipt was still in my email, dated 2 years ago. I printed it out and put it in a new folder I labeled in pencil, personal belongings. Then the dining table. I remembered measuring the space with Carmela, comparing wood finishes, making sure it had extensions for family dinners. That table had seen every birthday since Elias died, every school task, every spilled bowl of cereal. I paid by check. The carbon copy was still on my desk. The air purifier came during allergy season when Tanya complained about the kids' nighttime coughs. The pressure cooker was a Christmas gift to myself because no one else thought to give it to me that year. I walked through the house slowly, stopping to look at things I had forgotten: the floor lamp in the living room, the hallway shelf with extra batteries and cords, the welcome mat I bought after slipping on the floor. Every object had a story, a quiet and invisible record of service. I opened a new document on my laptop and listed not only what I had bought, but when, how much, and why. I reviewed credit card statements, store accounts, PayPal receipts. The numbers were consistent. The narrative was clear. When the kids were in bed and the hallway lights dimmed, I had 3 folders of receipts and printed records. I tucked them under my mattress in a deep corner and stared at the ceiling for a while. Just before midnight, I opened a private window and booked a studio in Cholula for the weekend, just 15 minutes away. I used a different last name, just a test, I told myself. A trial run, nothing more. I waited until Friday. Tanya had a work retreat, and Nestor would take the twins to their karate class and then to his parents' house. That gave me a 4-hour window, enough if I followed the plan. I parked the borrowed van a block away and texted Carmela, ready. She arrived 10 minutes later, sleeves rolled up and a look of steel in her eyes. We moved in silence, methodical, without slamming drawers or dragging chairs, just measured steps and sealed bags. We started with the master closet, my sheets, winter coats, the sewing machine hidden behind an old humidifier. Then the living room. I rolled up the rug, the one I bought after almost falling on the slippery floor. Carmela packed the books, paused when she found one with Elias' handwriting in the margins, and handed it to me without a word. The kitchen took longer. Every pan, every utensil I bought, every appliance I replaced, all of it went. The shelves were empty but clean, except for a mismatched set of cups and a broken strainer. I even took the pressure cooker. Especially the pressure cooker. We left the dining table for last. I cleaned it one last time before disassembling the extensions and wrapping the chairs in old blankets. Carmela shook her head as we worked. They're going to come in and think the house exploded. I didn't answer. They're going to come in and see what they built by taking it from me. By noon, the van was full. I took one last walk through the house, not to remember, but to make sure every corner I touched was recorded. Then I sat on the counter and left a note in a place where they'd see it. I had written it the night before, printed in the library, signed with blue ink. What I paid for, I took. What they discarded, keep it without affection, without a signature, just right. Carmela and I drove the van to the studio in Cholula, a small place with worn countertops and a broken heater, but the lock turned with my key. The thermostat responded to my hand, and the silence embraced me. That night, I made tea in my own cup, in a kitchen that didn't resent me, and I wrote a new list, this time of things I wouldn't miss. The locksmith arrived early, a thin man named Jonas, who smelled faintly of coffee and metal. I offered him a glass of water, but he kindly refused and got to work. It took him less than 20 minutes to change the lock. When he handed me the new keys, I held them in my palm longer than necessary. They felt warm, real. I signed the lease that afternoon, a 1-page document with no complications or fine print, just a monthly rent of 8,000 pesos, which I could cover without touching my pension. I set up autopay from a savings account Tanya didn't know about. I opened it after Elias' death, saving small deposits here and there. Back then, I didn't know what I was saving for. Now I did. That night, while unpacking plates in my little kitchen, the doorbell rang. I hesitated, still expecting reprimands or others' needs. But when I opened, a woman was there with a warm smile and a can of cookies. "I'm Letitia," she said, "Unit 3B. I saw you moving in. We play cards on Thursdays in the lounge. You should come." I nodded, surprised at how quickly I said yes. An hour later, I was sitting at a folding table with Letitia and 3 others, widows, 1 divorcee, all retired, laughing over terrible hands and strong decaffeinated coffee. No one asked me to clean. No one talked about me. No one expected anything but my presence. I returned to the studio with a strange lightness in my chest, as if the world was breathing again. I made scrambled eggs on my electric stove. I sat with my legs crossed on the futon and ate under the soft glow of a lamp I chose. The old house still resonated in my mind, but its grip was loosening. I slept with the door closed, the windows slightly open, and the keys under my pillow, not out of fear, but out of habit. A habit I was finally ready to leave behind. The first call came at 9:13 in the morning. I let it ring. I knew that tense, sharp, annoying tone. No message was left. The second came 20 minutes later. This time, there was one. Hey Mom, did you maybe take more than you needed? The fridge is totally empty. You really took all the pots. By noon, she had called 5 times. The sixth came at 1:04 with a message that started firm and quickly unraveled. The kids are crying because they can't find their cereal and the stove isn't working. Nestor is trying to fix it, but it's not the same. Where's the pressure cooker? Seriously, you took the washer. Yes, I did. I was sitting at my folding table, drinking tea from a cup I didn't have to share when message 8 came through. Mom, please, this is too much. We didn't expect everything to disappear. Could you at least bring something back for the kids? I mean, seriously, who takes the air purifier? Someone who bought it, I thought. By the 10th call, the sharpness in her voice gave way to something else. Look, maybe I didn't say things right. I was stressed. Nestor's parents aren't even helping, they're just bringing more mess. I didn't want you to feel rejected. It wasn't about feeling rejected. It was about what I had finally accepted. The 11th call came after dark. She sounded tired, hoarse. Mom, please. She didn't want to sound like that. Come back. The kids are asking about you. I didn't think you'd really leave. I saw the screen go dark on the 12th call, and I silenced the phone. That night, I stood by the window and looked down at the street, calm, still, unaffected by the chaos in that house across Puebla. I didn't need it until I missed it. There's a difference. I rinsed my cup, dried it with a towel I bought myself, and put it on the shelf I installed with my own hands. Mrs. O.S. Hidalgo's office was quiet, nestled between a dry cleaner and a flower shop in downtown Puebla. She spoke softly but directly. She reviewed my notes and receipts without judgment. She nodded while flipping through the folder, bank statements, appliance invoices, even an old grocery list I had kept on a whim. No rental contract, she said, but plenty of proof. You'd be a contributing tenant with legal rights. If you want reimbursement, we can draft a lawsuit, or you can leave it all. It's your choice. I nodded, but I already knew. I didn't want her money. I wanted the dignity they took for granted. That night, I wrote the letter. I didn't overthink it. Tanya, you didn't just live here, you invested my time, my money, my care. You treated me like a tenant when it suited you and a burden when it didn't. I didn't leave because of pain, I left because I remembered who I am. You lost a cleaner, a cook, a nanny, but most of all, you lost your mother. That cost won't show up on your banking app, but you'll feel it in your home. I folded it, put it in an envelope, and dropped it in the mail the next morning without a return address. When I got back, Letitia had left a pie on my doorstep with a note. See you Thursday. Bring your spark. I smiled, opened the door, and entered my space. Carmela arrived with a box of wine, 2 plastic glasses, and a bag of cookies and cheese. She looked around the studio and nodded approvingly. It's cozy, she said, taking off her shoes. And it smells like no one has yelled here. We sat on the futon and toasted like students, laughing until we gasped for air. For the first time in years, there was no clock, no one needing anything, no corrections about the thermostat or how to fold towels. Just 2 women who knew each other well enough to laugh with their whole bodies. The next day, Letitia knocked with a crocheted, floral purple potholder with a golden border. Welcome gift, she said. I made it when my hands were steadier. I thanked her and hung it on the oven handle. It looked nice there, as if it was earned, not expected. Days later, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was a drawing with colors glued to a paper plate. It showed a little house with a crooked chimney and stick figures in front, me and 2 small children. Above, in uneven letters, it said Abuse House. I pressed it against my chest for a moment before sticking it to the fridge with a magnet. I no longer had a formal dining room, a master bedroom, or a hallway with family photos, but I had peace. And this time, I wasn't just in the house. I was the owner of the peace inside it.